President McMahon is doing a great job with President Trump on this issue, protecting our students at these universities. These kids go to college to be safe, to learn in a safe environment, and that's not happening. And it's absurd that these universities are not stepping in to protect them, yet they're protecting these protesters who are also, I believe, some domestic terrorists.
And that's U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi with me here last weekend on Columbia University, agreeing to crack down on anti-Semitism protests on campus after President Trump canceled $400 million in government funding planned for Columbia. On Friday night, Columbia's interim president, Katrina Armstrong, unexpectedly resigned, becoming the second leader at the Ivy League to quit since the protests began last spring. Former ABC News correspondent Claire Shipman will take over as president on an acting basis while the Board of Trustees searches for the 21st president, but we just heard from Elise Stefanik that she believes Shipman is out as well in the coming weeks. In the latest financial report from Columbia, the university says it received over $1.3 billion in federal funding for fiscal year 2024. That accounts for 20% of the operating revenue. Joining me now in the Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is the Education Secretary, Linda McMahon. Secretary, great to have you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Maria. Nice to be with you.
Are you expecting President Trump to pull more funding from these universities?
Well, the president's made it incredibly clear that he expects that students who are going to universities can go to a safe campus without discrimination. What we saw across Columbia and other universities was that the universities were not living up to that. I mean, when you see students barricaded in the library, people pounding on the glass saying death to USA, death to Israel, and I've talked to students at Columbia, Jewish students who told me that they were afraid to go across campus, and a lot of the Jewish interaction on campus has been driven underground. And that's just not the way our education should be.
Amen.
And the president is really firm in that. And so the task force that was formed between the Department of Education, DOJ, Homeland HHS, and Government Services Administration, that's the task force that actually did go in and meet with the Columbia and tell them that their funding was going to be reduced by that $400 million, which a lot of that is from HHS, which is research and development. So we're letting them know that we're holding them accountable.
Yeah, you sure are. Look, we just heard from Tate Reeves, the governor of Mississippi, talking about the so-called Mississippi miracle, where they've been working on this for a long time in terms of handling their own education. Can you look at that situation and pull out ways that other states could actually be successful in overseeing their own education as you wind down the department and send it back to the states?
Well, Maria, that is really the whole intent. It's really to look at what education systems are really working with these innovative governors. And this doesn't have anything to do with the Department of Education per se. Department of Education doesn't educate one child. We don't decide on curriculum. We don't hire teachers. That's best done at the local level, and you can see those results in states like Mississippi and states like Louisiana, which just had also incredible improvement in what's called the NAEP scores, or the Nation's Report Card. And what we saw really was those states returning to basics, what's called classical learning, teaching reading from phonics, teaching math again with memorization techniques, because then you build on that foundation and you can increase the level of learning in a much shorter period of time. And that's what a lot of the states, Florida's been doing that, Iowa is leading a lot on that kind of innovation. And that's what we want to see. We want to be able to provide states with good best practices and good tools, to help them really get back to basics and get these scores up, so that our students are not running last in the world, and we're not continuing to spend so much money, more per pupil than any other country. When you think about the fact that since the Department of Education was set up, we've spent over $3 trillion to only watch our scores and our performance decline.
Yeah.
We're doing something wrong, and we need to change.
Amen.
Obviously, yeah. Well, what about student loans? People want to understand how issuing of loans will change. They need their student loans, and I know that the loan process was put into the Department of Education under Obama?
That's correct. And of course, the Department of Education has no bank. It is not a bank. It was an inappropriate place to put it, I do believe. I do think that it was there because a lot of the cash flow that would come through would be used to fund other programs. But in the meantime, what we've done is lost the responsibility of repayment of student loans. And so much of the conversation that was happening under the Biden administration, in which he was saying, don't worry, you're not going to have to repay these loans. These are going to be forgiven, etc. What that resulted in, that all through his administration, there was no collection process. Since even right around COVID time, when it first began, and there were instances I totally understood about repayments during COVID, but they were never reinstated. So there have been no collections since March of 2020 for outstanding loans. That's just a travesty, and it's a burden that the American taxpayers should not have to continue to shoulder.
Right. Well, you just said, look, the Department of Education doesn't teach students. It doesn't do all of the things that you would expect. So what specifically has the Education Department been doing? What does the Department of Education do then?
The Department of Education is really, it's a pass-through from funds that are appropriated by Congress for Title I funding, for funds for special needs and handicapped children. They flow through the Department of Education into the state districts to be distributed, by the governors or by the superintendents or commissioners of education in those states. And the Department of Education really also oversees competitive grants. That's also money appropriated from Congress. And so we'd like to look at those grants as being best practices and get rid of the waste and the abuse that was happening in the Department of Education. And we're finding much of that money has been spent in ways that it was not intended to be spent.
Wow.
So pulling that in, making sure that the money's being spent in the right way, providing best practices to states and the right kind of tools, through research, that they can have to understand how they can do better.
Now, in order for this to really be codified, you need Congress. Do you expect Congress to take this on and wind down the Education Department?
Actually, I'm very hopeful of that. I've spoken to, many senators and some congressmen, and we've talked about how we'll be partners that will show transparency to Congress. I hope by the time that we're really ready to turn education back to the states and turn that funding back to agencies where it originated. The Title I funding and special needs funding used to come through the Department of that time Health, Education, and Welfare, which is now HHS. And Senator Kennedy and I have already had conversations about having that come back and flow through there. And so, the Department of Education was set up in 1980, and all that funding just kind of had another place to go, but we can return it to where it was and have efficiencies in our government, and education will be in a much better place when it's closest to the students.
Sure, understood.
President Trump believes, as do I, the best education is that closest to the students. Who knows more? Parents, teachers, local superintendents of schools as they're establishing their curriculum.
Right.
We'll see test scores go up,
and return the elected superintendent of education to Kentucky, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, by the people, for the people, and of the people. Like I said back in 1992.
Check-in time of, field trips that are getting firebombed? Of course not. Now, we've also reached out to other car manufacturers like Ford and GM to see what they think about a fellow auto brand being the target of violent protests. We'll keep you updated, John.
All right, Matt Finn reporting. Matt, thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
So argues those judges are exceeding their jurisdiction.
It's not an accident that we call them district court judges. Their jurisdiction is against a plaintiff who has nexus in that district and over that district. And that first part is important because some of these judges don't even have a plaintiff who can demonstrate that they have any relationship to the district in which it's being filed. So it's a flagrant violation of what the statute was that created their office.
Here to weigh in with his thoughts, Arizona Republican Congressman Andy Biggs. He sits on the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees. Republicans seem to be on board with Congressman Issa, but some say the legislation he's proposing is not tough enough. What do you say, Congressman Biggs?
Yeah, I think there's some other avenues we can do, but it's certainly the first thing that Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution does is it allows us to limit jurisdiction. And that's what we're doing here with Darrell's bill. He's right on the money on this. That's the first step. There are other things that can and ought to be done, in my opinion, but this is where we begin.
I want to put up what President Trump tweeted, what he put on Truth Social on earlier today. He writes, "People are shocked by what is going on with the court system. I was elected for many reasons, but a principal one was law and order. If it was up to District Judge Boasberg and other radical left judges, nobody would be removed. The president wouldn't be allowed to do his job, and people's lives would be devastated all throughout our country." Judge Boasberg, for those who might not recall, is the guy who told the administration that they had to turn around the aircraft that were loaded with gang members, illegal immigrants, and gang members.
Shame on him.
Come to this country.
Shame on him.
The administration ended up defying that order, and the planes
Political
went anyway.
bias
But
crook.
it does seem interesting that
Shame on him.
Judge Boasberg, who wasn't elected by anybody, can stop, or at least try to stop, the work of the administration, the one guy in the country who is elected by the entire nation.
Yeah, John, that's right. And again, we get to this point of what Article 3, Section 1 allows. It only allows a federal district judge, or any judge actually, to serve under a term of good behavior. During good behavior is the actual quote from the Constitution. And when you're abusing your power here, trying to overrun what the president is doing lawfully under other statutory and constitutional provisions, then you are the one that is not acting in good behavior, and probably, in my opinion, you should be removed from office, which is why I've introduced, or will be introducing tomorrow, a bill dealing with this very topic that somebody like Judge Boasberg is going to have to respond to. It's not an impeachment, because an impeachment would require certain Article 2, Section 4 allegations, but Article 3, Section 1 says you only get to serve during the term of good behavior, and that's, I think he's exceeded that and demonstrated very clearly that he should be removed.
It's not just Republicans who are concerned about some of these judges and their rulings. Here's what Senator Grassley put in the Wall Street Journal this weekend. He writes, "Not only Republicans have been alarmed by far-reaching consequences of some district court decisions. 240 Democratic lawmakers, including Senators Chuck Schumer and Dick Durbin, in 2023 submitted a friend of the court brief warning of the perilous consequences resulting from a district judge's move to block the abortion pill mifepristone." I'm guessing, though, that you're not getting a lot of Democrat support on this particular issue, or are you?
No, we're not. I mean, there's been a few that have come up with raised eyebrows on the floor of the House, but you're not going to see them vote with us, John, that's for sure. I'd be stunned if they do. They don't want us to limit the judge's power because, frankly, that's their last refuge right now. They want the judges to actually intervene and intercede, and they're trying to make a case for that, but there really is no case for this. This is some of these judges have really long-standing political biases where they've actually manifested those not just in rulings, but in their lives and in the way they conduct themselves in their lives. And so they carry that bias over, which means that they're weaponizing the federal district court. And that is antithetical to jurisprudence in America. And so they in this case, for instance, the judge you and I have been talking about, I think he's exceeded all bounds and he needs to be removed. I don't think you're going to get Democrats that come along and say anything quite like that.
We will continue to watch this very interesting and
He should be
controversial
ousted.
situation. Congressman